Let's take a look at the laws of the road. The Vigilante Cyclist, who caught film director Guy Ritchie using his phone whilst behind the wheel, has boasted that he caught 358 drivers last year. Mike Van Erp has reportedly been responsible for almost 600 penalty points and £35,500 worth of fines whilst riding around London with a GoPro camera to report drivers using their phones. Guy Ritchie has been banned from driving for 6 months after he was filmed by this cyclist whilst texting at the wheel. Obviously, it was punishment for using his mobile phone. It might also have been punishment for the film Swept Away, starring Madonna. I might backdate that particular offence. Let's speak to a top lawyer now, criminal defence lawyer, also known as Mr. Loophole, Nick Freeman. Nick, welcome to the show.
Good evening, Mark.
Good to have you on the show. Nick, we are led to believe that the police are an extremely skilled group. They go about a painstaking evidence-gathering process when making any prosecution. Why, therefore, when it comes to drivers on the road, are they happy to have a bit of dodgy footage from a lycra-clad cyclist's iPhone?
Well, a lot of these cyclists that you're referring to are actually they're on a crusade and they're very adept and skilled at what they're doing. They've got GoPro cameras. Obviously, there will be an element of distraction, but they know from experience the evidence that they need to get, where they need to put it, and how to make it admissible in a court format. Very occasionally, they need to attend court. But there are several cyclists, many cyclists, who are doing this on a large scale. And they, as I say, they are quite skilled at ensuring that the evidence they get is of an admissible nature, and it has very serious consequences for the motorist. Let's be clear, you're not supposed to use a handheld device whilst you're driving your car.
Yeah.
But of course, that is for an interactive communication, and the whole spirit of this legislation, and it's important legislation, is if you're driving in what we call driving, not in a legal context, but you're driving along and you're on your phone, the level of distraction is the same as drink driving. But when you're sitting in a queue and you're texting your wife or girlfriend or whoever saying, "Darling, I'm going to be 15 minutes late, can you put the dinner in the oven?" There is actually no danger to that. And it's not really within the spirit of the legislation, although, of course, it is against the law. And you then have to consider the prosecution, who have to decide, first of all, is there a 50% chance of conviction? And then secondly, is it actually in the public interest to prosecute these people?
Yeah.
Because they're not really breaching the gravamen of the offence. They're doing something that's illegal, but is it actually in the public interest? When you consider the consequences, which are 6 points, a fine of up to £1,000 in court, and a massively hiked insurance premium if you get convicted of this. So there are several issues, aren't there? There are several different issues. Yes, the motorist is breaking the law. The motorist shouldn't break the law, but is this really what we ought to be concentrating on? And particularly as far as the police are concerned, who gets the credit for all this? Well, the police get the credit. Its conviction rate goes down to them and not to the members of the public who actually are operating these crusades.
Indeed. Well, when it comes to Nick, when it comes to the execution of the law and the delivery of justice, the devil is in the detail, which why you've had so much success with many high-profile and also non-high-profile clients, because you're extremely thorough and you look at every aspect of the evidence. Couldn't video footage be doctored or edited?
Well, yes, absolutely. And obviously any lawyer worth his salt is going to look at that video evidence. They're going to go through it with their client. They're going to make absolutely sure that it does represent the facts. And if it has been doctored by a cyclist or by anybody, of course, that person is running the risk of perverting the course of justice, which automatically would attract a custodial sentence. So, it's unlikely that that's going to happen, to be honest. What sometimes does happen is they tend to wipe the slate clean, because if a lawyer wants to have a look at the previous footage and they've been doing something unlawful, then that can pose problems for the cyclist. I mean, one thing that's particularly concerning for me is this. Apart from the spirit of the legislation, is if you've got cyclists going along using their GoPro cameras and basically stopping alongside motorists who are stationary, and they're turning, they're very vulnerable. They might wear helmets, they might not. They've got no real protective clothing. They're often on very busy roads because we know that there's congestion. particularly in London, they're distracted. They're not concentrating on their cycling. They're not concentrating on what's about them. They're concentrating on what this particular driver is doing. And it might be just for a few seconds, but during that time that they're recording, they're not looking where they should be going. They can't be, because the camera's got to be pointing in a certain direction.
Well, indeed, this was
they're exposing themselves to enormous risk.
Well, this was a point made by a colleague of mine here at Talk Radio, who said exactly that. And I've got a tweet in, with a huge response online to your comments so far, Nick. Graham from Bushy has tweeted in saying, Mark and Nick, I'm sure these cycling vigilantes are as pure as the driven snow and have never jumped a red light or gone over a zebra crossing with a pedestrian on it. Feels like one set of rules for drivers, another for cyclists, both road users.
It opens up a very interesting question. I've been campaigning for a long time now, and one of your colleagues on Talk Radio has been doing the same thing about cyclists being identifiable. And I know the cyclists, they hate this. They don't want to be identifiable because there is law in place, and that law is unenforceable, because what you have is if a motorist films a cyclist cycling badly, jumping a light, nearly hitting a pedestrian, whatever, what do you have? Well, you have that, but who is it? With a motorist, you have a registration plate, and I've been saying for a long time now, all cyclists that they need to have parity in law with motorists. So the first thing that needs to happen is we know who they are. So if we see a cyclist cycling badly, the motorist can actually report that cyclist. There will be a tabard, some form of identification on the cyclist that would go through a registration system. So he would have to be accountable. And if you're accountable, you tend to cycle more responsibly. But I know that the cyclists just hate this. And I'm not suggesting that all cyclists cycle irresponsibly. Most cycle responsibly. But there is a large minority who get away with blue murder because they're unaccountable. We just don't know who it is, and that's it. And the cycling law needs to have a lot more teeth. It's inadequate, it's inept, and it's unenforceable at the moment. I know that's not what we're discussing, but when you consider the harmony or the lack of harmony that currently exists between motorists and cyclists, and you then have this very unlevel playing field, it's going to exacerbate the problem. It's not going to help it. We're all confined, unfortunately, to a very narrow space that we have to share, and we have to do it safely. And cyclists are, of course, vulnerable. But we need to work together sensibly, and everybody needs to be accountable and responsible. And at the moment, the motorist is, the cyclist isn't, and that those are the facts, I'm afraid. And that they certainly don't want to be accountable. They don't want to be registered, and they don't really want to have law that can disqualify them, that can impose a drink-drive limit, that can incarcerate them for a lengthy period of time if they cause someone serious injury. All those sort of things. Not for me, thank you very much.
Nick's practice is Freeman & Co. nickfreemansolicitors.co.uk. Nick, thanks for your time. I'm sure we'll speak again. Of course, Nick Freeman is known as Mr. Loophole for good reason. Some